All right, so we're going to be picking up in lesson 3, and hopefully we'll get to lesson 4 tonight. We'll see how long question 5 takes us. Actually, I don't see Melissa. Is your mom sick? Oh, she's on. Okay. Appreciate the prayer from Jesse, and I just want to kind of reemphasize just the class as a whole and kind of what our purpose is. And I think that outside of doing a class in general on how should you act when you're just acting as a Christian in everyday life and the characteristics of a Christian, I don't think there's anything more important other than that than talking about the home and the family. Obviously, we should be living as a Christian 24/7, but when we are married and when we have a family, there's nobody that we're going to be around more, and there's no one that we're going to be closer with than our spouse or our family. And so that interaction and that bond, that connection is something that is going to be the most important relationship that we have in this lifetime. And so it's very critical that we make sure that we are living out those roles as husbands and as wives and as mothers and as fathers the way that Christ intended. And there's nothing more biblical than being a Christian husband or a Christian wife or a Christian mother or a Christian father. So this is the very foundation of the family. And I've said it at the beginning of class. I've said it for the last however many years that we have been here. I've said it a lot. Strong Christians make up strong families, and strong families make up strong churches. And what we desire to have here is a strong church, and that can happen if we have strong families. And so this is a very important class, and I do appreciate all of the input that we've had. I've enjoyed the class so far, and let's keep it up. And I will also mention, if you do have questions or things that you think might be of need to someone else, maybe it's not necessarily something that maybe you're wondering about, send those to me, and we'll get them added into the questions for whatever lesson I think is going to be best. All right, so question number 5 for lesson 3. What does it mean for women to be homemakers or workers at home, depending on which translation you're using? And does this forbid a woman to work outside the home? Lena?
I knew you would ask me your first question. I'm prepared. Okay, I would go with the second question. Yes, to Proverbs 31, 16 and 17. It says, "She considers a field and buys it. From her profits she plants a vineyard." Then 18 says, "She perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night." And 24, "She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies stashes for the merchants." So I would say it does not forbid a woman to work outside, since it says she can have a field and merchandise and all other things.
Okay, so she can work outside the home. So what does it mean just in general to be a homemaker or to be a worker at home? Andy?
Taking care of household affairs, which that's a good story for this particular question, because you can see that she definitely takes care of the household. She makes them garments. They don't have a want for anything, but then she also does other things as well. So she can do her job, and she has enough time or opportunity to do some other things as well.
Okay. Norm?
I think in the Proverbs 31 example is one of a person using all of their God-given talents to the full. And when you then incorporate that into what is my role, then you look at the God-given roles that God has given you. You look at the talents that God has given you that you have and you have developed, and then you use those to fulfill those roles. And the working outside the home and being good at that, and being a good example to the community, maybe known as a good business person, somebody that's honest, and as the day is long, and all of those kinds of things reflect again on her family, on her husband, and you can see that as you read through where he's standing in the gates. I can see the smile on his face because, everybody's saying, what a wife, that you have here. And so that would be my answer to that, not to get pigeonholed into different phases of your life, but look at it as a whole.
Yeah.
If the answer to does this forbid a woman to work outside the home, if that's yes, we got a lot of women going to have to repent tonight. Because we obviously have a lot of mothers and a lot of wives that work outside the home. But this is a good question to consider, something that we need to obviously think about and what it means in relation to being a homemaker or being a worker at home. Andy?
So I grew up in church with a preacher that was adamant that it is a sin to work outside the home. Heard multiple sermons over it my whole life. So yeah, there was no question, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you worked outside the home, it was a sin, and he would like to have all of the ladies come forward. That was his attitude. So my dad, he preached a lesson on this virtuous woman, and that didn't go over very well. She had a literal stroke nearly, but it was a hypocrite is what he was, because his wife, she ran a daycare in her home. She was working a full-time job, state regulated, but she was technically in home. So it doesn't matter how busy you're busy. Whether you're running a daycare, cutting hair, I don't care what it is, you still have a job to take care of your affairs in your home. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing those things in the home or outside the home.
Yeah, I think that is the primary point. If you actually look at the Greek word there, Strong's defines it as a stayer at home, that is domestically inclined, a good housekeeper, or a keeper at home. And then Thayer's says caring for the house, working at home, the watch or keeper of the house, keeping at home and taking care of household affairs, a domestic. And so I think that, again, the overall point is that you are attentive to your domestic concerns, that you're attentive to the affairs that you have at home and your duties to your family. That doesn't mean that you can't do these other things outside of the home, but you can't do these other things outside of the home and neglect your family. I think that's the overriding point. And so I would completely agree with the Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. It reads very well of, what a woman is supposed to be, and it talks very clearly about the way that she takes care of her own family, and but also how she's doing these other things abroad as well. Sue?
Back in the 70s, when my kids were little, we had a ladies' Bible class, and there were a ton of women there in the daytime because we didn't work out of the home then. And I remember the woman that was leading the class told us, she said, things are changing, things are getting so expensive, ladies, that you are going to have to think. You should start thinking ahead of something you can do that can help. This was in California, and that will help your family have enough to afford to live. And you need to be thinking about preparing yourself for things that you can do to bring in money to help your family, and also do all the things that you are required to do to run your home. And I've always remembered that because, I felt like I had done that because I wasn't working. I got my teaching credential, but I wasn't working, didn't work. And people would ask me, do you think you'll ever teach? And I'd say, I don't know, but if I have to, I can. And I felt like that was something that I could do, where I could also be there for my kids, because I was home when they were home and so on. So I think it can be done, working outside the home and manage everything at home too. But you have to prepare yourself for something like that. I'm not saying teaching's the only thing. There's multiple kinds of things people can do.
Yeah, and we talked about with the very first class that every family dynamic is going to be different, and some unfortunate circumstances may happen where the wife has no choice because the father or the husband has passed. And I even think about Mama Flowers, and I mean there are things that are going to have to happen. But I would hope as a Christian family in general that if you're talking about marriage and the man and the woman are discussing the different ways that they're going to run their household, that it is not a demand that's given, that the husband doesn't need to come in or the potential husband come in and say, no, you're going to work. Because if it's not necessary, then she doesn't need to work. And so I think that needs to be part of it, but also if she has something that she wants to be involved with, that he should be supportive of that as well. Norm?
Yeah. The man can make as bad a decision on selecting something to do to earn a living as the woman could. This partnership of the two of them in looking at it, like you say, it's the dynamics of it vary from family to family, but the bottom line is the partnership working together to do the number one thing, which is to raise their family, and then you get into what the talents of the man are, what the talents of the woman are, and all of that with the raising of the family in mind as the primary responsibility God has given us. Otherwise, the purpose of the family doesn't exist, outside of that. So
that's a good reminder. This lesson 3, the overall theme is the role of the man and the woman in the family relationship. So it's specifically the role of being a homemaker or being a keeper at home that's given to the woman. And so that is a role that she is going to have to fulfill. Outside of what other things she may be involved with, she has to make sure that she fulfills that role or that responsibility. Miss Shirley?
I was lucky when my children were small. I didn't have to work outside the home. But I made crafts and I sold them and done that and was able to stay home with my children until they at least got in school. And then I worked for 8. So, but I went to work at 8 and I got off at 3. So, you can work around certain things, and you can make money at home if your children are real young, if you want to.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a good point that you're making, because even though in the beginning you weren't working, you did things to keep yourself busy. And I mean, the virtuous woman, I'm not sure how she had enough time to do everything she did, but in verse 20 it says she extends her hand to the poor and she stretches out her hand to the needy. So there are works that can be done outside of even the home and outside of a secular job, things that can benefit others. And what does that allow a woman not to do that we're warned against? Becoming a busybody. Yeah. So,
homemaker, let me just put that out there. But since we have been married, I've been a nurse, so I was in nursing school when we first got married. So I will have to say that there were times Andy helped me. I mean, as a nurse working 12, 13-hour shifts, I don't feel like cooking supper when I get off. So I text him or call him, hey, I'm running late, and he would start supper. And does that mean he has to cook supper every night? No, but I think that it helped to know that he helped me. So, see, I told you I bragged on you. I think that, yes, it is our job to be a homemaker and keep the home. Now, if you come to my house right now, it looks like a tornado has went through it. But I feel like that I try, don't always do the best job at it, but I make sure that we have food to eat at night, and sometimes I have to wash blue jeans at midnight because I forgot to do the laundry for him, and he's gonna not have anything the next day. So, but it's a team effort, and so he helps me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good point too. It doesn't say that you're to be a homemaker, and so then you're supposed to be the only one that washes the dishes and washes the clothes and cooks the meals. That's not what it says. So there needs to be a little bit of give and take from both sides with helping each other. Any other comments on number 5? All right, question number 6. So we did this with the men. Let's do it with the women now. List some examples from scriptures of good and bad examples of wives and mothers. Jesse Jackson, you got one?
I can't remember the name of the person. That's who I was trying to search for. But David was out one time and he was going to require something of a man, and the man didn't like him and he wasn't going to give him anything, so he was going to kill them all. And a woman come in between and supplied him what he needed. And I appreciate about a person that they're willing to, no matter who it's against, stand and do the thing that's right, or at least right in their own heart and mind. You know what I'm saying? But I cannot for the life of me find that name.
Abigail.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, I was looking for the wrong one.
So yeah, so that's so I brought up Nabal last week as the bad example for a man.
I kept hitting Naboth, okay?
It's Nabal's vineyard. Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's you a good example.
That was easy. So I didn't try.
So it was Ahab's fault. Yeah, so
That's the house I live in.
it was.
Okay, when I was saying two boots make a pair, or every pot has its own lid, talking about husbands and wife. Every husband has the wife that matches him if they go together for years and years. And I think Jezebel and Ahab were perfect for each other. You might not consider them Christians, you might not consider them good people, but I don't know if she was a bad wife for him. So that's just my personal.
So the passage that I would talk about with Jezebel is 1 Kings 16, 30 and 31. It says, Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. It came about as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the sons of Nebat, that he married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went to serve Baal and worshipped him. And then in chapter 21, verse 25, it says, Surely there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel, his wife, incited him. Yeah, they were a pair, all right. That is for sure. They were a pair. All right, so Jezebel, she's the best example of a bad example. And every pot's got a lid. All right. Is that a Ukrainian saying? Because I don't think I've ever heard that. Every pot's got a lid. Anna?
I mean, even though she gave her son over to the Lord, but she took him a cold every year. But she promised if she had a child, she would give him to the Lord.
Yep.
Well, and then she came later and brought him every year some clothes. And so I put her there too.
All right, what's another example, good or bad, that you've got? Jesse Flowers?
Lois and Eunice. Sorry, I take it back. I can something else.
Lois.
Yeah, hopefully everybody thought about Lois and Eunice. So that's Timothy's mother and grandmother. And It's obviously very evident from scriptures that they did a very good job of teaching and training Timothy. So they're definitely commendable parents and grandparents. Ken?
I had Delilah, who tricked Samson and he lost his strength, and actually the Philistines got the advantage of it.
Yeah. It's pretty rough to have as a wife. It's pretty good example of being bad. Others? Lena?
I have Micah for that wife, the first wife of David. Huh? Whatever, the first wife of David, and when he would win the battle and come to town and singing and praising and dancing to God, and she would just fuss at him for doing such silly things.
Yeah.
And of course I put Mary, mother of Jesus, as the good wife and mother.
Yeah. Joseph would have been, I think he was mentioned as one of the ones that was a good father too, with what he had to put up with. Other examples? Eve? Sapphira? Ananias and Sapphira? All right. Jesse?
Rebecca she went behind Isaac's back to deceive. Then Job's wife, though she obviously suffered the same things that he did with the loss of the children and possessions, and it wasn't the most encouraging thing that she said to him in chapter 2, cursing God.
Yeah, I think Lynn actually brought either Job or Job's wife up last class, and yeah, that's pretty tough when the person that's closest to you is basically questioning you. Why are you still holding on to your integrity? Like, just curse God and be done with it. You know, this is enough. Yes, yeah, Eli would be. We talked about him last week as a bad father, but Job, I mean, obviously he didn't curse God, but his response, he says, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept adversity?" And all this Job did not sin with his lips. So that's pretty powerful when the woman that is your wife is, telling you to do this, and you've got the faithfulness and the strength to stand up to, even with everything that you're going through. Solomon's wives, we are told that, they helped draw his heart toward other gods, and so that's obviously something that we have to be mindful of whenever we're choosing a wife.
We don't have 2 or 3 wives or husbands these days.
Right, you shouldn't. That's right. Another good one that I think of is Ruth, and I think of both. We always remember Boaz, but we don't often think about her first husband, Mahlon, and she had to have been a pretty devoted wife. I think that shows just in the way that she is treating her mother-in-law, shows that she's a pretty good woman. In Ruth 3:11 it says, "Now my daughter, do not fear, I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence." So just in that, I think about the virtuous woman and how she's lived her life in such a way that everyone around her knows that she is a woman of excellence. And that's something that I would think as a woman would be pretty great, when everybody around me is able to claim that I'm a woman of excellence. Obviously, the worthy woman or the virtuous woman of Proverbs 31, like we've already talked about. Maybe Jochebed. I mean, that's pretty good amount of love that she was showing there for Moses. Anyone else?
You mentioned Ruth. You take Naomi there too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Marissa? Gomer? Andy?
With abortion being so prevalent, I was thinking about those, the 2 ladies that Solomon had to help them decide which one's going to get to keep it. In 1 Kings 3, I believe, And so the one decided to say, yeah, go ahead, chop it in two. Bad mama.
Yeah. I think that, one of the reasons that I ask this question is the scriptures are full of instructions for things for us to do in regards to husbands and wives and mothers and fathers, but there's no better way than to actually look at some of these examples. And outside of just the examples that you have in scriptures, I'm sure that we all have examples within our own lives. I've talked about my granny. I've preached a sermon and talked about my granny, and she was the virtuous woman to a T. And so we have these examples in our lives that we can turn to as well, and both good and bad, that hopefully will help us. Anything else on number 6? All right, number 7. How could a husband or wife defraud the other sexually? So again, we're talking about just the roles, the responsibilities of both the man and the woman, and we've already discussed 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 2 through 5, and the importance of the sexual relationship. And go ahead and turn over there to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So this is specifically in verse 5. The New American Standard says, "Stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." And other translations use the word defraud. So how could a husband or a wife defraud the other sexually? Tiffany?
About it before, if you're at work more than you're at home, you're not spending time with your husband, then how are you going to fulfill your duties as a husband or a wife if you are devoting more time to work than being at home?
Okay. Bonnie?
Well, it talks about how your body, is not your own, it belongs to your spouse. And so when I think about that, you are serving or you are, trying to please, trying to serve each other, which is going to take a lot of communication. So I think about how, you have to communicate with one another if you're going to serve them sexually or in any of these ways, but specifically in this passage, I think it's important to communicate with one another so that we don't end up defrauding one another.
Okay. I see another hand. Norm?
Sexual drive is one of the most powerful drives that God gave us. With eating, breathing, it ranks right up there. And so if you use that power as a weapon against your spouse, you're going to have real problems, and that could take many shapes and forms. You could be blatant, it could be devious, it could be blackmail. There's all kinds of ways so we have to remember that is one of the most powerful drives that God gave us, and that was a good thing. So we should use it for a good thing.
Yes. It's a good thing, and it's a wholesome thing, and we did talk about it previously, how it's something that we should enjoy and take advantage of and not use as a weapon. So the Greek word there for defraud means to deprive, to despoil, defraud, destitute, to keep back by fraud. So essentially it says that neither partner in marriage has the right to deny the other one's sex, except for what? Except for consent, for agreement, and for how long? So what's going on typically during this time of consent?
Prayer.
Yep. So that should tell you how long or not long that that's going to last. All right. So it's not going on for an extended period of time because it's not likely that, or even reasonable that somebody's going to fast for a long period of time. So if a partner denies their spouse sex, is that grounds for divorce? Is it wrong? It is wrong. It is sin. And the reason I ask that question, I hope that it is abundantly clear to everyone after the question that we've already talked about as far as the Greek word porneia and the grounds for divorce. But this is an article. I've done a lot of reading, just with this class, and man, I've read some crazy stuff. And it frightens me, to be honest with you, because this is the way that a lot of Christian men and women too, but this one is specifically just directed at men. So this article, he's from a religious guy, and he had written an article previously, and this was kind of coming back around, and he had made a few edits. But it was empowering Christian men with steps to confront their wife's sexual defraudment. And so in May of 2015, when he did his first one, he says, I published an article entitled 8 Steps to Confront Your Wife's Sexual Refusal. In this article, I detailed 8 steps that Christian men could take in confronting sexual defraudment on the part of their wives. This article has since become one of the top 5 viewed pages on this blog, and this page alone has had about 800,000 views since I first published it. I made some edits to this article over the last few years, but essentially it has remained the same. Here are the 8 steps I list for men in confronting their wife's sexual refusal. So this is a religious guy telling Christian men, this is how you need to handle a situation if your wife is defrauding you of sex. And not only is just a few people looking at it, by this point I'm guessing there's probably already over 1 million views. All right, and I read some of the comments of some of the men. I'm just telling you it's sad, and I ain't even got to what he said. So this is his 8 steps for men when you're going to confront your wife's sexual refusal. Step 1, rebuke her privately. And we should probably talk about, and this isn't one of the questions, but how do you handle this situation? If you do have, and this could be either way, because I actually asked a question in lesson 4 that kind of the roles are reversed. So step 1, this guy says rebuke her privately. Step 2, stop taking her on dates or trips. It's like, I want to laugh, but this ain't funny. I'm telling you, this is legit. Step 3, no unnecessary household upgrades. Step 4, stop doing the little extra things. Step 5, remove her funding. Step 6, rebuke her before witnesses. Step 7, bring her before the church. So one of the things that I hope that we can see that we have talked about, that our roles, our responsibilities, they are, they are, what's the word that I used? They are mutual, but they are not, man, the words just left me. No, it's a, yes. Thank you, Bonnie. All right. They're unconditional. It don't matter what the conditions are. Your role, your responsibility is what it is. It's God-given. You got no way out. All right. So just because my wife is not doing what I think she should do doesn't mean that now all of a sudden I'm going to stop doing what God told me to do. How about I just stop doing what I'm supposed to do so I can make you do what you're supposed to do? The logic in this is just beyond me. So he continues. He says, then I gave the 8th and final step for husbands if these 7 steps did not bring their wives to repentance. And so now he goes to his original article. So this is the original article. Now he says, what if none of these 7 steps work? If your wife remains willfully defiant, yet she has not left you, it could be for a variety of reasons. She may not want to lose how she lives with you, and she knows that after a divorce, her lifestyle will be severely affected, and she does not want to deal with the consequences of divorce. Perhaps she may have some genuine care for you left as well as your children, but she simply cannot see the error of her ways and will hold out indefinitely with the hope that one day you will fold and give her back the money, the dates, the trips, the household upgrades, and she will not have been forced to change her ways. But you have a final step you may take, one that you need to pray long and hard about before you do. You have the option to divorce her for her sexual immorality. This is, I can send you the link. And so he uses Matthew 5 and verse 32, which again, we have talked about this, and people totally, they define, because a lot of our translations actually use the English term sexual immorality. And so they have this notion, well, if it's immoral and it's sexual in nature, then okay, then I can divorce over it. We've already discussed that. It's not the case. Every form of porneia that we talked about is sexual intercourse. And so because your wife is denying you sex, is she sinning? Absolutely. If the husband is denying the wife, then it's sinful because it goes against 1 Corinthians chapter 7, but it is not grounds for divorce. And what's even more sad is there's a guy that actually divorced his wife because of this, and then he wrote her a letter. It's bad. And the comments, again, are worse. But I'm telling you, this stuff is for real. And we have to make sure that when we are teaching our young men and our young women, our sons and our daughters, that this is the way, that the house is, or the family is supposed to be. These are your roles as a husband. These are your roles as a wife. And we need to make sure that we are abiding by God's rules and God's laws and the responsibilities that he gives us in everything. So just as a side note then, how would you handle... Who? Drew? Sorry.
I was just going to say, attitudes like this are probably the reason that people would get in this exact situation. So, to some extent. Not that it's right on either part, but just that kind of an attitude would lead to problems in a marriage quickly.
Yeah, you could probably talk about this attitude with question number 1, not number 4. If you read this guy's letter that he wrote to his now ex-wife, it's so bad. Go ahead, Jesse.
How Jesus kind of distilled the entire old law down to 2 principles. I think that the doctor's name is Eggerich's last name. The book is called Love and Respect, and this is a person who did marriage counseling for ever. I think the book's probably 15 years old, but it's like an entire career summation of the 2 principles that are behind the 7,000 problems. And it fundamentally comes down to the concept of the woman feeling loved and the man feeling respected. And it's just profound because of the simplicity and how everything really trickles down to those 2 things. And what he advised was the exact opposite of this. If you are deprived of whatever in the relationship, you go the extra mile and do the things that you know that the other person needs. And it's sort of a natural feedback mechanism, and it's really, really interesting kind of spiral. And the way that people, against their will, would grit their teeth and go along and try that in the beginning, and what it did for their marriage. And the case studies that are just innumerable for the effectiveness of that biblical principle of the man showing the love and the wife showing the respect. Beautiful book.
Yeah.
Divorce.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the text we studied recently, 1 Peter 3, with that wife who's married to a non-Christian. What should she do? She can even win him over without a word because of her character, her conduct, her behavior. Mm-hmm. And this is the exact opposite. Ungodly behavior to further ruin your marriage.
Yes. Ms. Shirley?
Sometimes there's medical reasons, or one or the other.
Yes. That situation, it wouldn't be defrauding. Tiffany?
I mean, in this situation, I guess maybe this would make me even madder. I mean, this would make me want to just completely be as mean as I could get. I mean, I'd be spiteful. I just don't see how anybody in their right mind could think that would help help make her want to. I mean, he's treating her terrible. So I would just have to treat him terrible back. I couldn't
There's
deal
at
with
least
that.
800,000 other men that,
I feel sorry for their wives.
yeah.
Did those 800,000 agree with him?
The comments that I read, they were agreed, yes. Bonnie, you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, I mean, yes, all that stuff is silly if he proceeds to do all of that, but you could totally see how he would feel that way. Because if she's doing that to him, it would be really hard to continue to do all of that stuff. If you're the man in that situation, you are the victim of her sin. So, I mean, no, I'm not saying he should do that, but you could definitely see how hard it would be to do what Jesse's saying and go that extra mile and continue to still shower her with love and appreciation and everything else when you're getting nothing in return.
Yeah. Clarissa?
Again, to emphasize, this is why it's so important to pray for our children and their future spouses, and to make it very clear to whoever their significant other may be in marriage, you know, the clear roles, and make sure all of that. And then, you know, people that are in the world, like that have no love for God or the Bible or anything, they'll see this, and that's what shines an evil light on, you know, Christians in general, which have been, you know, kind of blankets us in that mix, even though we are, you know, Christians in this world. So we have to make sure, just like in anything in life, there are peaks and valleys, and our children need to know that too. You know, your marriage is not going to stay perfect, but there's got to be tools in place to help, you know, communication and all that kind of thing that they need to be taught and understand as well. But we also, this is where we need to make sure we're shining as lights as far as like even how we're vocal about our spouses, about how our marriage is, about how we want to raise our children. Like, be open and vocal and make it shown so they know what real Christians are doing, not those Christians that shine the light that do turn people even more away from, you know, even believing in God, because that sounds so, you know, there's all that Christians are hypocrites, they don't even want to help, or, you know, all that stuff that gets thrown out there. We've got to make sure we're showing very clearly the true, like what we're talking about, the true roles of a husband and wife and how they should be. And again, I'm not trying to say that all that will always be perfect, but anyway.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, from the kind of attitude this guy has, apparently, it sounds like he may not be a very nice guy otherwise, you know, and he probably isn't very lovable with the kind of attitude he has, so, you know.
Yeah, I don't think that he was. And we made the comment a couple of classes ago that it's hard on the husband when the wife's not living up to her responsibilities. It's hard on the wife when the husband's not living up to her responsibilities. But that doesn't disavow us from the responsibilities that we have to fulfill. But this is something that we definitely need to be talking about with our children and talking about with couples before they get married, because this is definitely a responsibility and a commandment not to defraud. Thanks, everybody. We'll pick up with lesson 4 next class period.